Welcome everybody to the second global event. This one is sponsored by Legal Wolf, the podcast dedicated towards all things mental health. And we are talking about mental health and how it's perceived within the media spotlight, be that film, TV, or any other form of media, including social media. My name's Steve Lawlor. I'm a mental health lawyer with several years' experience and have set up the Legal Wolf podcast, which is sponsoring this event today, discussing all things mental health, tackling the stigma around mental health. And I've become more passionate about advocating for mental health since I went self-employed in October of last year. So that's a little bit about me. If we move to Claudia next.
Yeah. Hey. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me today to co-host. So my name is Claudia. I'm from South Africa, Deputy CEO at the Global Mental Health Peer Network. I have lived experience with anxiety and OCD, and it was through my lived experience that I became passionate about mental health and mental health advocacy. I also was a lawyer back in the day, but I've chosen to go into the mental health route, so which has been great. And I'm really keen to see what today's conversation is going to be all about. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here this afternoon. I'm Abdulmalik. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a mental health advocate. I'm an online psychotherapist with over 3 years experience. I run online advocacy, awareness, and intervention via my website, malikmalik.com. I'm glad to be here, and I welcome everybody to this great event. And thank you, Steve, for inviting me.
Thank you, Steve, for making this happen, and Claudia as well, and for having me as part of this wonderful gathering to talk about mental health in the media. My name is Noemi Weis, and I have been in the communications and media my whole life, doing social issues and human rights films. And my latest film, Connecting the Dots, deals with mental health. So I have been immersed in the mental health world of youth mental health, particularly since 2017 when I started with the project. So it's been a few months that we are with the film out and bringing the voices of young people to the world. So it's part of the communications and using media and the power of media for social change.
Hi, my name is Daisy Eduardo. I've been speaking up about mental health for just over a year now. I have lived experience of anxiety, panic attacks, depression, self-harm addiction, and I was suicidal for a long period. And I'm now embarking on a career in law. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm a marketing manager at Tiger Law, actually, so media is right up my street. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
Hello, everyone. I don't know what time frame it is for you. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here for me. And Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for being a visionary and putting this together. It's so essential that we meet from across the seas. I'm originally from Barbados, but I reside currently in America, in New York City. And I'm a human industrial and trauma psychologist. And I've been in this capacity for some time now. And I also am an educator. So I was over 60 schools. I'm a professor here as well in New York. I work with Senate, Congress, the Assembly. I do training and development for lawyers, Homeland Security, police officers, various facets in government and so forth, because it's so essential that everyone come to the table and understand what mental health really is about and not, function under the parameters that the media has been telling some people that mental health entails. What is mental illness? And the fact that, I work a lot with individuals who've dealt with human trafficking at some level as well. So when I say I'm a trauma psychologist, I deal a lot with sexual violence I deal a lot with individuals who experience some form of severe trauma. And so helping people to understand what trauma entails and how we can help people through the healing journey. And so there's no way that I wear my hats and consult, government and all the other people without media being involved, right? Sometimes it's being interviewed. Other times it's advocacy and telling the media to get it right, or we're going to have some problems, So I'm on both sides at times. We need media. We need the media to share our stories. We need individuals to tell the truth, though, about what it looks like, that someone that has mental illness, it does not mean that they're violent. It doesn't mean that they're dangerous. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. So my work is really built around getting the right message forward as it relates to individuals that experience whatever type of trauma or disorder, and to have people understand that normal is not really something that I function under or my team functions under, because you know what? Normal is different for each person. We all have our own normals. And so it's I thank you and everyone that's on this panel on today for being the voice for so many, and for letting those individuals who are experiencing whatever they're experiencing right now to know that we definitely support them. And, they're so valuable that we spend this time today to bring it to the forefront. So thank you.
I'm Surpreet, Patheja. I'm a recent law graduate and a mental health advocate from India. I would like to thank Steve and Claudia for having me as a panelist today, and I'm really excited for a talk today. Thank you.
Marie, I hope you've got the same enthusiasm as last time.
Oh, Steve, thank you. No, I don't have the same enthusiasm. Maybe it's going to come up. But just before I came on this webinar, somebody sent something to me about somebody just died, and they were already saying she died of something else, whereas she had a cardiac arrest. And, they've already put that out on social media, and people are already saying all kinds of things. And so I was talking with this person in the backstage and saying, this is not fair to her family, her friends, and to us, and stuff like that. And this person was saying, well, they told the other person to take it down. And anyway, so you see why I'm not so much in a good mood, but I'm going to pick it up. So yes, I'm Marie, and I'm a person with lived experience from Cameroon. I'm also a psychotherapist, mental health advocate, so many things in one. I'll be doing more of listening today, because when I just listened to Dr. Coralanne talk, and to, she's from, is it Austria? Yes, I'm like, we are going to have a wonderful time today. So thank you so much, everybody. Let's roll.
Thank you. And we've also had Kristel join us all the way from Fiji. Is it 2 in the morning where you are, Kristel?
Hi, yeah, it is around 2 here. So my name is Kristel. I'm from Fiji. I'm a barrister and solicitor by profession, but I have a background. I spent about a year or so working on various film and television productions. So that's where my interest and, I suppose input will probably come in handy, I suppose, in terms of mental health and the media. Thank you.
So the first topic that I would like to discuss is to gauge people's opinions on how mental health is perceived within the media. So who would like to go first in terms of panelists in giving their opinions on this particular topic?
I think that there's something very, very important when we talk about human rights, social issues, and any topic, particularly mental health. When it comes to talking about anybody's story, which is usually the case that is reported, or statistics, I think that research and fact changes is extremely important. And we don't see that all the time. So there's a lack of respect in coming up with a story that I feel that if it's not really facts proven, that you don't, whoever is going to be writing, whoever is going to be telling a story, it's very, very important to do proper research. It's very, very important to be objective, because as storytellers, and I speak about myself, I feel that it's not my story, it's the story of someone else that I'm telling. So I owe it to that person who is actually able to open up and share that story with the hopes that that story is going to impact other people going through the same problem or the same situation. So that person becomes a symbol of hundreds of millions of other people that are feeling exactly the same. Their voice is extremely important. So when we are portraying that story, when we are talking about that person, when we are talking about that person representing so many, there's a big responsibility on the person who's telling the story, but there's a bigger responsibility in us as storytellers in how we tell that story, because we have the option of editing, we have the option of manipulating if we wanted to, and we see that very many times. When it comes to mental health, it's such a serious topic that could be taken into so many ways that I think it's very responsible for whoever is going to be on the other side to not only do research, but also think about who are we representing and why are we representing and what kind of story we want to tell and who is the audience that is going to read. So I think that that is fundamental. And once that is really once that work has a very big foundation, I think that we are able to use media in a positive way to create social change, to bring awareness, to raise topics that other people will not have the opportunity to talk about. And we have that power to do that. We have a tool. And if we think about it as a tool and we combine the effort of so many talented writers that are bringing forward stories, I think we can use media positively, but I think that there's a conscious decision that has to be made in order to make sure that that story is portrayed in the light that it deserves and with a lot of respect.
Then how does the media perceive mental health? For them, it's like some storytelling, sensational thing that can bring in so much business. And so if it is, for example, when Alexander McQueen, died, we can talk about that and sensationalize it because he hung himself. They would describe the details and how he was found and all of that. They don't even think about the trauma his family is going to get just seeing it all out there like that. And I mean, you can just, you have to show the same compassion you will show. Let's say somebody has a cardiac arrest, somebody has, diabetes, cancer, stuff like that. I really don't get it. And then now we also have social media. We think media is only traditional media. Look at what they just did to somebody. Somebody died of a cardiac arrest 3 hours or 2 hours ago. It's already all over social media. They say she used a charm and the charm backfired and so she went mad. Can you imagine that? And I'm now trying to calm people down on the back end. I'm like, but before putting out this story, and immediately they get the story, they're fighting to put it out to get the largest clicks and all of that. And I'm like, if there were some rules that could get people to, as Noemi said, edit, but are they obliged to? I don't really know. People are, maybe Dr. Coralanne is going to tell us if there's some rules somewhere in my country. Not really. People can be sued for defamation, but that is if you have money to take them to court and all. So it is really so complex. Personally, I wouldn't like, even if I have a meltdown, for somebody else to run with it and go say it out there in whichever way. Let me do my sharing myself. That's why I do a lot of sharing and talking. I want to put it out there the way I want to put it out there, and I'm not going to feel any bad seeing it that way, because I don't think somebody else is going to tell my story the way it's not going to harm me or, stuff like that. So I really think that the media doesn't perceive mental health like something that relates to human rights, and they need to be careful about the way they talk about it. And so when we have these kind of conversations, maybe we are also going to put some pressure on them so that they kind of sit up and don't have to explain to us the way this person took her life like they did for the doctor in Kenya. And it's sometimes grueling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Naomi and Maria, for your input. You know, it takes courage to talk about, you know, the issues of mental health. It's a very courageous thing. And we honor these conversations by doing what's right. You know, I say that all the time. You honor a conversation, a necessary, courageous conversation, by implementing things that's correct. You know, there's distorted messages that go forth. There's discrimination that goes forth as it relates to, you know, the media and mental illness. I think of the over-sexualization of women. I think of the fact that, you know, media at times have, you know, sent a message, as I you know, stated earlier, that someone who may be suffering from some, I don't even like using the word suffering, someone who may be experiencing some form of mental illness. You know, I try to correct myself and my colleagues not to say the word suffering, because, you know, we all go through various things in our lives for whatever period of time it is. And so I too like to make sure that I check my verbiage as it relates to speaking about my colleagues and anyone with lived experience. You're the expert. You know, you're the expert that come to the table. You really tell us what you're going through. And I say us because I'm wearing the hat of clinician, but, you know, I've been through trauma, right? I've experienced trauma. And, you know, that being said, as Naomi was speaking, it made me think of just a couple years ago, a major broadcasting network here, where they were talking about human trafficking, and they wanted to interview one of my colleagues. And she was so nervous to be interviewed because she just did not want them to try to manipulate her story, try to use her story in a negative light. And she called me and she said, Dr. C. And I said, yes. She said, would you come with me? And I said, with you where? Like, you know, I'm going, where am I going to, right? And she said, well, they want to interview me at this network, and I'm afraid that they may, that they're just using my story, one, for ratings, and two, that basically she was afraid that she would be harmed, not physically, but emotionally, that she would be triggered and not have a support system. So I went along with her on that interview, and some of the questions, indeed, you can tell that they were not, the interviewer was not well versed on trauma-informed care. That individual was not well versed on how to question or how to formulate questions as it relates to someone who have experienced years of sexual trafficking or just trauma in general. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because I think it's time for individuals in the media, just like the lawyers have to be trained and doctors have to be trained and teachers and everyone else. Guess what? If we're going to do due diligence to individuals that have experienced any form of trauma, they need training too. They need training about discrimination and how that looks. And I know a lot of times when people hear discrimination, they're thinking color. They're thinking, a black and white issue. But I want to say today that that's not just all that it entails. We are sending the wrong messages when we don't understand that we can do harm, even when we don't even realize that we're doing harm. There's a saying, if you're here with us unfaithfully, you're doing terrible damage. If you are not educated as part of the media about the content and the trauma that someone could have experienced, if you're not well educated, you are doing harm because you are practicing in an unfaithful manner. So I think when it comes to the media, what we need to understand, and Maria, I can hear it in her voice, even on what happened to her today, how she's feeling, the fact that, you know what, harm was done. And harm can be done emotionally, harm is done psychologically, you know. So I think when it comes to the media, we need to step back and have these collective conversations and say, what is it that we want? Is it that we want the story to be the first one to push the story out? Or do we want solid content that has humanity involved, that brings a sense of understanding, a sense of wholeness, and a sense that no one is in this world to experience the world alone, but we collectively are the tapestry of humanity. And so I think that that's what's missing when we bring these stories forward. An individual shouldn't have to be afraid to be interviewed because they think that harm will be done to their person. I think that that's where we need to look at, are we, you know, maybe in our colleges and universities, they should take a course on trauma-informed care. Things should be implemented, HR, you know, and I know I missed the one that you had on trauma in the workplace, but HR departments and organizations and companies need to really bring to the forefront that we don't harm each other, you know, as it relates to mental illness, because mental illness is burnout. There's so many facets to mental illness. And I think that we need to concentrate on what will heal humanity instead of what will harm humanity. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I thought of maybe just going back to Noemi on something interesting you were saying is you need to have, you know, the facts in place, you need to have done research. So I think we also, as much as we're mental health advocates and we have lived experience, we're trying to also understand the processes behind what you do in the media in order, before you get to the publication or before you post your article. And I think what I would like to know is, when you say you're doing your research and fact finding, what does that mean? Like, how do you process that? What would you guys do? Because for me, just as an example, we as mental health advocates, sometimes we're scared to go into too much research because we're not academically in the research field, or so we can't do research as research is perceived. So I would like to ask that question to you, because I think we also need to be fair as to what you have to go through before you publish your stuff.
Thank you, Claudia. Yes. Well, in the case of connecting the dots, I spent over 2 years doing research. When I start on any of my films, I always tease about the fact that I'm taking a master course. It's a topic that I don't know about. I don't know about mental health, but I feel that there's something there that I should be talking about and utilize my medium to raise awareness of a topic that we need to talk about. So I spent over 2 years doing research, and the research was talking to more than 200 professionals and organizations from around the world who open up to answer so many questions that I had, to speak with young people from around the world, listen to their stories, just without judgment, opening up a safe space where they could tell their story, talking to parents, talking to teachers, talking to educators, a very, very deep amount of research from all angles that I could think from the point of view of the protagonists, that in my case were young people, to everyone involved in their lives, and trying to understand how all of that. Then talking to big organizations that are the ones who put all those numbers out, that we say this percentage went up and that percentage. And I realized that with mental health, nobody was able to give me any numbers because they were fluctuating all the time. So it was my decision that I was not going to quote anyone, because nobody was so serious about saying with certainty, these are the numbers that we can quote. They were old numbers, the situations were changing, and I didn't feel right about quoting anyone because those numbers were not definite. But I think that a big part of all that research brought me to language. I think language is an incredible important part of the learning process. And when Dr. C was talking about learning how to interview people, it's fundamental to understand what language to use. And I didn't know that certain things were said differently, that you couldn't say commit suicide because the word commit meant something else. And I can give so many examples. And at the beginning, I thought, well, this is very politically correct. I'm gonna be so self-conscious about everything that I talk about, that I want actually that when I have a conversation with anyone, it's going to be free. But I realized that no, this was something that I needed to learn. I needed to incorporate into my language, and I needed to be able to speak about the language in a way that every question that I would ask, everything that I would want to know, came and perceived and be understood by the person listening to me in a way that that person would feel totally comfortable and safe more than anything. There's a certain safety that we need to provide when we are doing an interview that it's fundamental. And people ask me very often, how do you get into that? Well, I think that is because you have to do that research. You have to learn. And I agree 100% with Dr. C saying, yes, you cannot just go and do an interview with anyone without being prepared and without knowing the facts of that person as well. Before even interviewing, you have to ask very many questions. So it's the chicken and the egg, what comes first? And I think that it's the person that takes the role of telling a story that has to be very responsible about how and when that story will be told. And then how do you portray that? And like I said earlier, with a lot of respect, but research is fundamental.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks so much. So I think the lesson learned here is that there needs to be more collaboration with all the stakeholders, because if lived experience, experts by experience are consulted on perhaps something that the media is doing. So for example, if you had spoken to specific lived experience organizations, then maybe that learning would have, sort of got you to see things differently. So I think that's quite important, and it's really important that we're doing this conversation, because I think it's going to open up a lot more conversation to come. Thanks, Noemi.
Daisy, now I'm kind of glad, well, I am glad that you raised your hand, because I know you've come up to the nasty side of social media recently. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I definitely have, and that's quite a important thing to talk about. So we've seen over the last few weeks, in light of 3 of our Black England players getting just an onslaught of racist abuse on social media. It's absolutely disgusting what we've been seeing, but I think it would be a mistake to act as if it's particularly unusual. Sadly, in this age that we live in, of online accounts, very little regulation from governments or social media companies themselves, it is so easy for people to, whether it's racially or sexually or whatever it is, just abuse people online. There's really no consequences for them at all. And I myself came up against a lot of sexist abuse a few weeks ago on TikTok. I've been using TikTok for about 6 months now. And I posted a video about the monetary value of the unpaid labour of women in the UK. It's just a simple statistic. You can disagree with that if you want, that's fine. But I actually got hundreds of comments which were personal attacks. I had someone say, "Death to your family." It got really bad. So I looked at ways, how can I keep using this platform? Because I know how to protect myself. I'm very conscious with my mental health, and I prioritize it, have strong boundaries. So I wasn't going to keep using it if it was affecting me like that. And the only way to block all of these accounts was to read through the comments one by one. That's not okay, we can't be giving that level of personal responsibility of, oh, if you're using these accounts, then you're leaving yourself open to attack. And if you don't want to be abused online, you have to read through every single comment and block them one by one. That is having a devastating impact on people's mental health everywhere. And we've seen it in celebrities lately, but let's remember, who is the main user base of TikTok? It's teenagers. It's young adults, it's kids. And the bullying that goes on is really vile. And it's all kind of happening in this realm where you're not quite seeing it. It's not happening in a schoolyard. A teacher's not going to notice that someone's being bullied. It's kind of invisible. It's very hard to put your finger on. And I think it's something we should all do with being a bit more aware of. And we need to, it's hard to make social media companies accountable in that way, which brings me around to what I wanted to say about Dr. Coralanne said before about the media writing stories. Do they want to write it to get the headline out the quickest and get the most hits? Or should they be writing solid content? Now, how can we incentivize people to write solid content in this age of clickbait? Every click they get, that's where their money comes from. Why would they not put the most fear-inducing headline, the one that's going to make you think, I'm not safe, I have to read this, I have to click this? Mainstream media, particularly newspaper headlines and clickbait on the internet, it's designed to exploit our fear, exploits our psychology. That's how they make money off us. And that's just the way that it is. And I'd be very interested to hear, we've had a lot of discussions about how the media can do things differently. How do we incentivize that when it is we're in an age of information for profit? How are we going to get to a place where actually they're going to be more profitable if they don't go for the clickbait option? I'm not sure when we're going to get there, and also how that plays out in the political realm. I mean, we've really, in the UK, we're kind of in an age where the divide and conquer strategy is being employed against the domestic population. And look at how immigrants have been scapegoated over the last however many years by the media, and how that plays into the political realm and the consequences of that we're seeing and living today. It's how can we move away from that? I don't have the answers. I'll be interested to learn from everyone else and see what your views are.
Well, I mean, you shared me a video, didn't you, on Instagram, Daisy, from a Dr. Jess Taylor, which was on TikTok. Now, I don't like to reference TikTok. I've never been on TikTok. But this video was about how the stigma of mental health is never really going to go away.
The phrase and the campaign that you'll have seen over the last decade or so to end mental health stigma is an oxymoron. You can't end mental health stigma because the entire discipline is based on stigma. The mental health movement, psychiatry, psychology, it's based on stigmatizing individuals who don't conform, who are, struggling or something has happened to them. So we medicate them, we isolate them, we stigmatize them, we tell them there's something wrong with them, and then we tell them that we can solve it by giving them medication or treatments. You cannot end mental health stigma because the entire movement is about giving you stigma that you then are supposed to respond to.
Now, initially, when you showed me that video, I initially thought, I'm going to be honest, that the title is clickbait. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hate it. I'm going to disagree with everything she says. But when you listen to it, it's like, well, hang on a minute. She's got a point with what she was saying about this, about mental health and the stigma associated to it. What were the comments like on her video, Daisy? Did you have a look through them? Was she getting a lot of abuse from what she said?
I haven't looked through the comments on that particular video, no, but I have followed her for a while. So she's called Dr. Jessica Taylor, and she's a feminist psychologist, a unique angle that I hadn't seen before, and that's why I shared it with Steve to see what he thought about it. So I didn't look on that video, but I've seen on her other videos, it's horrendous abuse. She receives rape threats daily. She's constantly getting threats of personal violence. It is never ending. And I think I have heard actually that there are Reddit forums where people, I don't know if you've heard of the term incel, involuntary celibate men who blame women for not having sex with them because they think that they're entitled to women's bodies. They have Reddit forums where they will kind of cycle through feminists who speak online, and they'll say, today let's all target this person, and then they all log on to all of their anonymous accounts. Some of them have hundreds because it's bots, and they target this particular person for a day. So you might have one day where you're just getting hundreds of thousands of these comments and threats and attacks, and what can you do about it? The next day they've moved on to the next person, and then a few weeks will pass and they'll come back to you. And I have seen Dr. Jess Taylor gets just an astounding amount of that. I don't know how she handles that. I think her sense of purpose is so strong that it just fuels her even more, which is very admirable. But yeah, astounding.
Yeah, I mean, before we come on to the topic of how social media platforms can be more accountable, how they can address the clear issue on social media, which has a detrimental effect on everyone's mental health. I just want to touch on another topic quickly, and clean answers only, because the question is, what is your impression of the press?
I'll keep it short. In general, my impression of the press is, particularly the UK press sector, psychopathic. In general, there's a few publications and channels where people have moved away from that, but I think we've got a real problem in that sector with psychopathic leadership, and that trickles down on all levels.
Abdulmalik, what's your impression of the press?
I would say sometimes, yeah, for the part of the world I come from, it's most of the time trivialized. Sometimes they'll underestimate the impact of mental health, and they overstretch any form of physical illness. So it has not really been a way for people to even invest as much energy they invest in their physical health and to their mental health, because of the way the press, the media perceive it, the way they make it look to people. Because by the time issues or cases surrounding mental health pop up, they are not really given as much attention as it should, or it doesn't really make up for headlines and as we would have for a similar or something that relates to physical health. So the issue has been more of trivializing mental health illnesses and issues in the press, especially in Nigeria and some part of Africa.
And I'll be brief as well. Well, it's twofold here in America. I have to say that I have seen press that really are our allies. There are stories that have been brought to the forefront that I sit back and I say, yes. Sometimes I make a phone call or I'll text one of my colleagues and say, you nailed that one. Thank you. So there's some stories that I'm proud of, where they get it right, because just like Naomi said, they did the research, and their main focus was to educate and bring awareness and to be an advocate. And let me tell you, for those stories, sometimes it's not easy for the person who's standing on the front line saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing the right way. Because we have a lot of individuals whose heart is in the right place, but those stories don't get played. Those stories aren't published. Those stories aren't seen. And so, yes, we have allies, but then on the flip side, there's some stuff that is pushed out that I'm going, what the heck was that? You did more harm than good, and I use the word heck to be clean, as you said, right? Because it really boils my inside. And so it's I see it on both sides of the spectrum, but definitely there's work to be done. And just hitting back what Daisy said, in just what we're doing right here, and what you all do on your pages and the stories that you tell. We are sending the message that it's not okay if you're going to do it incorrectly. So this is where we start having this conversation and applauding the reporters and those storytellers that do it the right way. I think from time to time, we need to send them messages and say, thank you. Thank you for getting it right. Thank you for doing justice, you know? And so we think so much about the stories that's not correct that we really don't applaud the individuals that get the story, you know, correct and do justice. So I think we need to look at that aspect as well.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to jump on and quickly say, I mean, I do agree with the comments so far that there has been a lot of improvement with media coverage, especially as someone recently mentioned, just the language in terms of, you know, when there's a suicide and things like that. But I feel that, I mean, current media attention on so many cases at the moment, you have Naomi Osaka in the sports arena, you have Meghan Markle with, you know, her celebrity status, and of course with the royal family, all of them speaking about her own mental health issues, and basically both of them being gaslit. And then we've got a much older situation, which is also quite a bit in the spotlight now, with Britney Spears and her possible mental health issue after, possibly with postpartum depression, but because she didn't get the help she needed at the time, no one really knows what her mental health issues could have been at the time, which is really sad. But the other thing is the coverage of the, not the gaslighting, but the coverage of these women is the way it's been portrayed in the media is as if they're at fault, that, you know, they should have done better, or they were somehow, you know, not you know, doing their best, sort of a thing, that they could have tried harder. It's the blame to be more on the women rather than the fact that they do need help. They should have received help, and, you know, they should be treated as if they'd had any other medical condition. And of course there's a lot of nuance to that as well. You know, being in the park, I can imagine people, again, the stigma, I can't imagine people don't want that be, oh, I went to a mental health facility. I mean, even when people, as common as is with these celebrity, you know, circles, even going to rehab facilities and things like that, even that's still got quite a bit of stigma attached to it. So, you know, the coverage is important. I think there's also, you know, as much as there's negative coverage, there's also been a lot more discussion because these men have spoken out and because their stories are publicized. There is a lot more discussion about what mental health is, and there is a lot of positive discussion about the fact that no, you know, someone like Naomi Osaka, anxiety disorders and anxiety attacks shouldn't be forced to give, you know, conferences and things like that when she's feeling up to it, and that these things can be balanced and can be worked out to, you know, suit the person's mental health status. And then also, I mean, even here locally, we've had a horrible situation. I think this was just maybe a month or so ago, just before cases spiked with COVID. So there wasn't much really in the news, and there was this young girl, I believe she was about, you know, 16. She'd posted something on TikTok, and then, you know, she got a lot of bullying online, and unfortunately she self-harmed and took her own life. But the thing is, as horrible as that is, and I can only imagine how horrible it was for the family, but the way media covered it was just some kid posted something on TikTok and, you know, just kind of getting overly dramatic about it. And then, as if it was bad enough, I mean, then you look at all the comments to the article, and it's just making fun of her for being a silly kid. Comments like, well, you posted it on social media, what did you expect people to say? You know, things like that. And, you know, I've seen other countries where you have a child bullied, it gets covered in the media, it gets covered a particular way that's very sensitive to what's happened. And then you have the social media backlash, and then people pile onto the family, because then they'll say, oh, the parents should have looked after the child better, the parents should have done this or that. And some people will even just mock the way in which the person died by suicide. And as horrific as these incidents are, it's just so jarring that people would do that. Like you would never, or I've never seen anything like that. If someone dies from cancer, or someone dies from some sort of kidney failure or something like that, but for some reason when it's related to health, people feel at more of a liberty to make fun of it and dismiss it. So yeah, I just wanted to contribute to that.
I didn't want to, I thought I was not going to talk again, but when you ask the question, how do you perceive the media, to be honest, as a lawyer, I don't know if the media is helping mental health or not really, because I have worked in my country. There are a lot of people in our jail here who have a mental health condition, and you need to see the way the media talks about their cases or about them in the paper. And sometimes I'm like, I myself am one of these people. That means that if I go cuckoo again, they are going to just crucify me, and it is so, that's what I said in the beginning, it's so unfair. And so I'm thinking, is the media our friend? Yes, Noemi said we need the media, but frankly speaking, like Dr. Coralanne said, if these people are not going to accept to be trained, and if they're not going to start doing things differently, then if I ever have a story and the media needs their story, no matter how much they offer me, I'm not going to give them that story. That's all I can say. I don't trust the media. I know I use social media, but I also just do only what I want to do there. I don't want to go and read other things because it's always blown out of proportion a lot of the times, and it doesn't help even me, Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think with social media, you're in control of what you post, which is a big help. Whereas things can obviously be taken out of context and out of proportion.
Hi. So as for the Indian press, for the most part, they seem ignorant about the mental health issues and the correct way to report them. As far as I'm concerned, they just want to be the first one to report it. But recently in the Indian media, they did make a shift from using the term committed suicide to died by suicide, which I think is a start, because in India, until 2017, until the Mental Health Act of India was enacted, suicide was considered to be an offense under the Indian Penal Code. But the Indian Mental Health Care Act actually decriminalized committing suicide, or actually dying by suicide, or attempting the suicide. So the Indian media, it was enacted in 2017, but the reports I'm reading in 2021, now they've made a shift from committed suicide to died by suicide, which I think is a start. And I also hope that they start using first language and report cases more empathetically and with dignity. But right now, I think it's a start that they've made the change in one term. So I'm hopeful about that. But for the other part, I really think that they also need to be educated about the whole thing, like others we've talked about.
So I think it's very important to recognize that we do need media. We are talking about breaking a stigma, and the media is very important, but we need media on our side as well. But to the point of Marie, I think that it is very important, if anyone is being asked to be part of any interview, that person research as well and knows who is that person, what background that person, how did that person tell other stories, was that person respectful, was that person honoring that story. I think it goes both ways. We are in a world of communications where we are not alone and we depend on each other, and I think that if we all are on the task and the mission of breaking the stigma, we do need the media. And media could be positive, as Dr. C was talking. Yes, let's talk about how the tools are positive to bring change. I have many, many examples to give on that, but I think it's important that before we say no to an interview that could actually break the story and then be that voice to so many hundreds of thousands of others, if we are being interviewed, I am interviewed many, many times, but I do research who is the medium, because the medium is the message. Who is that person who's going to be interviewing me? Do I trust that that person is going to tell my story? Because I am responsible for the stories that I tell. So, it's a chain of events here. And I think that all of us need to ensure that we can bring that collective effort of understanding who we are before we start having that conversation, being respectful about it. And then, yes, let's think about the positive side that we could bring if we really want to break the stigma. Media is very, very powerful. We just have to use it responsibly, and we have to use it with respect, really, for one another. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a two-way street. There needs to be give and take on both sides when it comes to dealing with the media, which moves on nicely to the next topic that I want to discuss, which is around the film and the TV industry. What can they do to help reduce the stigma of mental health and normalize the conversation?
Hi, yeah. So just to sort of give a bit of background from my I worked on 2 reality TV show productions and 1 film production, and with for both formats, I found that when it comes to mental health, everything revolves around drama and storytelling. So, and of course, viewership and ratings and all of as well. So a lot of the producers and writers as well, when they're putting the scripts together, their focus was mainly on, okay, how do we move the story forward? How is this going to be interesting for the viewer or more engaging? And even just watching movies, I mean, there was the Amy Adams movie that came out, the Woman in the Window or something like that, where the person is, living with agoraphobia, and she's previously had mental health down after the death of her family and all of that, and just the way it's portrayed in the film is purely as a sort of protagonist to move the story along. And it also shows how people as well, as soon as you mention, oh, this person was previously institutionalized, that triggers in a viewer's mind that, oh, this is going to be used to discredit the person, or because we have that mentality, or maybe it's a stick as well, that one person is institutionalized. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, I mean, they don't even specify in the movie what the reason was for institutionalization. It could have been something, whatever it was. Well, at least for that part of the story, and of course it goes on to mention her family. But that's, again, is stigma is, she received treatment. So I would think that, okay, you received treatment, you've been discharged, you should be, okay to be out and, making decisions for yourself and so on and so forth. But I think the stigma is so strong that, and it's even shown in the story that it's sort of portrayed in a way that since she was institutionalized, that's it for the remainder of her life. She's got, mental health problems and she can't be trusted. Her point of view is always going to be touched. Her ability to differentiate between fact and fiction is going to be tarnished. And there's just a lot of stigma in the way the stories are told. And you go to movies with Halle Berry, and I think it was called Gothica. Again, another story where mental health is used to make you question the ability of the person to distinguish between fact and fiction. So I think it's just the other dangerous thing is that with this agoraphobia thing, which I find with a lot of these movies and films that use mental health as a plot point, is that they always seem to give off the impression that if you put someone in an extreme situation, which is what happens in this agoraphobia storyline, is that she's put in an extreme situation, and by the end of the movie she's cured. She can go out and about, everything's all good. And sometimes all people know about mental health is what they see these TV shows or these movies. So if you have a younger person who doesn't understand the fact that this isn't portraying mental health properly, and I've seen kids. I mean, I've got a fear of heights, which isn't the same, but sometimes kids misunderstanding things. They want to put you, sort of push you towards the ledge and things like that, because they think that, oh, you overcome fear of heights if you just jump into the waterfall or whatever it is, and not really thinking it through, maybe not having the maturity to get through that they could actually do someone real harm. And so it's just as simple as, oh, I'm going to force you into this situation and your mental health issues are history, sort of a thing. So there is, I guess, a need, just going back to the storytelling issue, is maybe just to stop using it as a mere plot point, and actually using it in a context where there are people on social media who have autistic children, for example, and they've got either mental health issues of their own, and they've really sort of documented how they go on their day-to-day life, how they just live as normal human beings and get treatment, and I guess in their own way, trying to break the stigma around mental health and how people cope with anxieties and all sorts of disorders and mental health issues. So I feel like if a movie could sort of capture that it's just another thing people need to live with, that of course there are always going to be extreme situations, but for the most part, if you need the help you need, you can live with it. And I think it just needs to be less emphasis on the dramatization rather than what it actually is and what can be, and how it is in, not necessarily the real world. Well, no, actually, yeah, in the real world, because the sort of fantasy fiction version of mental health is just creating or adding to the stigma. And then the other point I was going to mention about the reality TV shows is not just in terms of a plot point, but the actual people who are on the reality shows, or participants in the reality TV show. They're I don't know, I just feel like kind of like guinea pigs in a way, like they're just sort of thrown into these situations. And once upon a time, I suppose when Survivor first started way back in the day, it would have been a lot of pressure even then, with all the media attention and the criticism and all of the nastiness that comes with that, depending on how they're portrayed in the media. But now you have social media, and a lot of these people are just constantly being barraged with, oh, you look fat, you look this, you look that, or oh, all kinds of criticism and things that are just. And the thing is, some of these young girls, because some of them are between the ages 21 to 24, some of them have already been struggling with eating disorders and a lot of other issues before they get onto these reality TV shows. Then sometimes you can think you're fine and you're able to actually cope with these things, but then when you're confronted with it on social media, then it's really difficult to sort of just push it aside. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just our interpretation of film as opposed to the story they're trying to tell, because sometimes they may have a different intention with the story, but then it just gets lost in the way it's told. Feel like with the Joker film, a lot of it, there was some positive aspects to that film, just how society can sort of create a really unhealthy situation for a person and just not give them the help that they need. But at the same time, gets caught up in all of this violence and the comic book lore and everything. I feel that this got lost along the way, the mental health aspects of it. So sorry, just wanted to put that in.
That's fine, Kristel. Daisy?
I think that there's three things that the TV and film industry can do to reduce the stigma around mental health and create more positive stories around mental health. And they all kind of link in together. So the first one is take a trauma-informed approach and see people within their context. So, for example, with Britney Spears, we've seen a lot of headlines and speculation about her mental health. And looking back on that, is it any wonder, in light of the abusive conservatorship that she's under, you know, it's not necessarily just about labeling someone with a disorder and washing your hands and that's that. Often there's reasons that people have mental health challenges that are outside of their control. We spoke earlier about abuse on social media. There's lots of different groups around the world that are living discriminated against. They have different challenges that they're facing day to day. And I think a trauma-informed approach really takes that into account. Secondly, and it ties into it, the anti-victim blaming. So often we see the person who's actually a victim framed in a way of, well, what did they do to deserve it? And when the media sticks to certain stereotypes, it makes it harder to escape that, because then if you don't fit that stereotype, people are less willing to accept you, that you didn't do anything wrong. And there's proper training that people can do to be anti-victim blaming, and Dr. Jessica Taylor, who I mentioned before, she actually provides those services. I really recommend looking up victim focus and reading her books. I noticed that after reading her book, I noticed some of the things that I think were actually internalized victim blaming for things I've been through. So we can all learn something from that, even if we think we're not doing it, we might be. And the third one is, again, links into that, tell diverse stories. What we don't want to be doing is hearing the same things over and over and over again and glamorizing certain aspects of mental health and villainizing other aspects of it. We all come at this from different angles. We're all humans with different lives and different social structures with different challenges and lifestyles and jobs. And I think we need to bring more of that into the light and not just hear the same things over and over and over again. So trauma-informed, anti-victim blaming, tell diverse stories.
Okay, for the media and film production, I feel, well, we, to some extent, we've demonstrated that we have an in-depth understanding of how messages are being passed in movies, on the media. And I feel one of the things we need to first do as we're trying to put us together, collaborate, and lead a conversation is to rectify these messages. And as you're doing that, in a way, the stereotype, the stigmatization, and in a way, the trivialization surrounding mental health issues would be getting reduced. And I also feel I would completely agree with what Dr. Coralanne said the other time, that journalists can even take short courses on mental health. They can be trained on reporting, and scriptwriters can also be trained on reporting or depicting mental illnesses in stories, in movies. And I feel with that, we'll have a better way of understanding and letting people be more aware of mental health and illnesses and other issues surrounding it. And also, we could even have a situation whereby experts would be considered as characters in these movies to, in a way, reshape the way the scripts are written so that they'll have a better story to tell. And any story that doesn't really need to bring up mental illness shouldn't be used for movies, and also shouldn't be used in the movie. And also, some of the terminologies we have in mental health should be used with a clearer precision. They should be expertly used. If at all they couldn't get experts on the cast, they could seek for expert opinion on some of the things, because many times there are overgeneralizations of mental illnesses. Sometimes they'll feel like, okay, because it's happening in this particular issue, it could, we can generalize it to other mental illnesses. This should also be looked into. And sometimes I've recommended that short stories, it could be in episode, it could be in series, could also be done. Because let's, for instance, if we have episode 1 talking about a particular mental say bipolar disorder. The next episode could talk about another mental health disorder. So in this first disorder, we could have it being described. We could have the disorder being described. We could have the steps we need to take, the teams of professionals that will be needed to resolve this problem. We could have the intervention method, different intervention methods. We could also have it in a way that there could be, because there are different causes of these disorders, so we could explore different causes of the same disorder, of the same problem, of the same challenge. So let me be very careful with my usage of words. So with the same challenge, or we have people experiencing similar or the same challenge going, or they are going through similar challenges. So we could bring them on board, using that to examine different causes that could lead to these mental health challenges. Also trying to see how these challenges could be resolved. Because one thing people learn a lot from movies, they vicariously learn this thing, though they feel like, oh, what I'm seeing in this movie speaks a lot about me. I feel if I could adopt that to my problem, or my challenge rather, could get resolved as it was done in the movie. So people like can be doing all these things. Also, we need to collaborate, promote blogs that talk more about mental health and illnesses, promote blogs that talk about awareness. And because I feel awareness, advocacy, they are still ongoing in African countries, most especially where I come from. Awareness. But one thing that struck my mind last year that made me to at least provide a solution with the little I could was to look at it from another angle. As we are advocating, as we are creating awareness for mental health, we should strategically be coming up with solution interventions, even if it will be via phone calls, via therapy.
Thank you. And I'll be brief. You know, I'm thinking about the fact that we do need to change the narrative in our when individuals are thinking of production or just sharing stories. You know, as everyone was speaking, I started to jot down, what are the things, you know, if we want media to understand what changes are necessary, we need to first really make a clear statement as to what do we see as it relates to mental health or mental illness that we're not supporting. And so, you know, I just jot down 8 that came to mind, and it's the criminality. You know, when we see stories about individuals with mental illness, it's criminality. It's that they're unpredictable, they're dangerous. You know, they're impaired self-esteem, displaced youth, negative parental practices, medication seeking, right? So those are, you know, that's how individuals are portrayed. When we look at movies and so forth, and the individual has some form of disorder or illness, it's always that they're dangerous and you have to be careful. They're unpredictable people. They're unsafe. You can't be around them. And we have to change that narrative. We need to be able to tell or to project positive human interest stories. We need to rewrite the narrative, because in truth, we repeat what we don't repair. And for so many years, we've been repeating the same stories with a negative light and conditioning members of society to see individuals that have a mental illness in such a negative manner. And so for me, it's about, you know, Daisy, you're on point, my sister, with positive best practices with trauma-informed care, right? That's what we need, but we need to project these positive stories. I have an individual that's just, she's so awesome, and she runs part of the health department here in New York, and she has schizophrenia, and she'll let you know. One of the first things when you meet her, she'll say her name, and then she'll say, and I have schizophrenia and I can do it. And I think that is so powerful, because she's telling, the message she's sending is, don't you lock me in a box. Don't you think that I cannot contribute to society? And I think that that's what it's about. It's about, hey, media, we want you to tell our stories, but we want you to tell the stories in a way that brings honor to us, that brings value to us, and that shares a part of us that, you know what, if I experience trauma, it's a part of something that I experienced, but it really isn't who I am. And so that's what we want people to understand. Do not define me by an illness. There's more to me than that. And so that's what I wanted to share. Let's give value to people.
Thanks for the opportunity. So mine is more just a share than a suggestion, but I recently completed my thesis speaking to parents in underprivileged communities in South Africa of children with ADHD. And my topic was on stigma and ADHD specifically. And one of the questions in the research was, what can the community do? What can we do to address the stigma? And overwhelmingly, their response was, let's address it as a public health issue. Let's address it the same way that we've addressed teen pregnancy and HIV and tuberculosis. Let's reframe it that way, and that people would be more accepting of it in that light, which was a really interesting insight that I wasn't expecting. And then their other feedback was to use people as examples. They said they want to hear from other people who have ADHD who have been successful. And so to use those types of portrayals in the media, they felt would be really helpful in combating the stigma.
I mean, there is multiple things that can be done to tackle the stigma, but I guess it's essentially down to whether the media, the film industry, the TV industry, the social media companies, they want to listen to what needs to be done in order to improve the way that mental health is perceived on the big screen. Obviously, Noemi's the exception with the work that Noemi did with Connecting the Dots. I've seen it. It's a very powerful, moving film. It's brilliant. And there are some other films out there that do address mental health well, but more often than not, it's the films that depict it in a bad light that are the ones that tend to be remembered for the longest amount of time, which is a shame. I mean, yes, we have come a long way in the media, the film, the TV industry, and I don't want to completely bash them, because we have come a long way, but there is obviously more work that can be done, and that essentially needs to be done. They need to listen to people with lived experience, experts by experience, in order as to how mental health should be perceived on the big screen and the small screen. But that's enough from me. Sahar, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Time differences, but I was listening to what you all were saying, and I totally agree. But I also think that there's some movies that really got it right. There's this movie, Silver Linings Playbook, which is about this guy who has bipolar and he's undiagnosed, and he has this episode where his wife is cheating on him and he attacks the man, and he then has to go into a psychiatric facility. But the whole point is he comes out, and he really comes out on top in the end. And it just shows that, even if you have a mental illness, you can still function and work in the world. And it highlights the reality of having a mental illness and balancing that and family and professional life. So I think that's one of the movies that did get it right. But then I also think, there are other movies that failed. And I guess even in the passing comments in movies, like I remember this one, I think it's Valentine's Day was the name, and it had nothing to do with mental illness. But one of the characters said, oh, she's, we call her bipolar Paula because her mood is always changing. And I found that to be very offensive, because that's not how bipolar disorder works, right? So I think there's a lot of little things like that. And, whether people say, oh, she's crazy, she's all over the place. She's always crying. She's always sad. I think things like that tend to be like a jab to the heart, especially when you actually feel those things and you're going through it. And then like someone kind of makes a cynical comment about it. And it's like, but it's so real for me, or for other people. So I think that's something that really needs to change, the thought of it using it as something that's funny, because it's not, it's real and people are going through it. We wouldn't do that with cancer or diabetes, we wouldn't do that with any physical illness. So we shouldn't do that with any mental illness, right? So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
I could trust the media, if they start doing better. And I think that they can do better. We cannot babysit the media anymore. This is 2021. And the pandemic has brought a lot of people to their knees, even big people in the media there. You see, Oprah, the media queen, is taking mental health. Like, I just finished reading that book, What Happened to You? And, so people are talking, Prince Harry is talking, everybody. So nobody's exempt anymore. And I think that they will start talking differently now. So we just have to keep pushing. And I want to thank everybody who is so involved. And I just told myself today, you are involved too, right? Even if I'm more on social media, but that's also where a lot happens. But to kind of fight on social media, you risk losing your own sanity. So I just select where I go to. So like you, I'm not on TikTok. I'm not so much on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, try to protect my own screen. So in the end, well, the media needs to step up. They need to start saying it as it is. They need to stop sensationalizing, like Sarah said, the way they talk about things that happen to when people have cancer and teenage pregnancy, HIV. That's the same way they should talk about mental health. And one last thing, I'm not making any mockery about this, but I'm just saying that when it happens to you, like when it happens to Pastor Nick Warren, the language changes automatically. And people who have big platforms like that, when they change the way they talk about it, every other person beneath them starts to change the way they talk about it. So, I'm grateful to Oprah and other people who are taking this up. Steve, all of us, let's just keep it up. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a closing on this. First of all, thank you, Steve, for the good comment about connecting the dots. And I invite everybody, of course, to be part of it. We are creating a movement with all of the participants. But more important, I think that if we talk about on the positive side, and I just want to leave it on the positive side as a closing, I have dealt in my career with films that cover gay rights, that cover domestic violence, that cover child traffic, that cover really difficult topics. And this one, Connecting the Dots, is about mental health, which is certainly not an easy topic to deal with. But in all of them, I always try to bring a positive message at the end of hope. If we are not able to bring a solution, it's very difficult to portray or to recommend a solution when we talk about mental health. We can talk about preventative solutions. We can talk about ideas that we can all do together in order to improve the situation. But also, I think that when we are talking about media, that is so easy right now is not just the films that we are making and filmmakers like myself that undertake difficult topics, but right now it's so easy to just post on social media, like everybody was talking, make it just a short message, and that becomes a little short film that you put out, and everybody became a filmmaker on that end. But if that message is positive and that message can create an impact, then please think before you record it. Please think before you put it out there, and make sure that you're bringing hope. I think that when we are talking about mental health and youth in particular, is let's bring hope to that. So my mission with Connecting the Dots is a very large impact campaign, which is trying to bring conversations, mental health films and topics that we've been talking about, so many movies that were stated by so many today. When you're watching it alone, it's very difficult to process that information. But I believe that in order to bring change is to have a conversation, a post-discussion after watching a film that is related to mental health. That's where the changes are happening. And that's what we are doing with Connecting the Dots, because a conversation afterwards, it will bring openness to the topic and will bring change eventually, hopefully, or at least open up a dialogue that did not exist before. So let's think about hope, and let's think about positive ways to use the message. Thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a very good time to end this discussion, end it on a positive note.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.